The phone vibrated on the polished mahogany desk, its subtle buzz somehow louder than the ambient noise of Manhattan traffic 28 floors below. Jackson Hayes glanced at the unknown number, nearly declining it before something, intuition perhaps, made him answer. "Hayes," he said curtly, his attention still fixed on the quarterly report spread across his desk. "Mr. Hayes?" A woman's voice, hesitant but determined. "My name is Megan Turner. You probably don't remember me." The name struck him like physical force. His grip tightened on the phone as memories flooded back. Her laugh, the scent of her perfume, the way she'd looked at him that final night with tears streaming down her face. "Megan," he breathed, the quarterly reports instantly forgotten. "Of course I remember you." A decade of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and untold stories. "I wouldn't call if it wasn't important," she continued, her voice betraying exhaustion. "It's about the twins. They're your children, Jackson. You're listed as their father on their birth certificates." Jackson's world tilted on its axis. The sleek corner office with its panoramic views of Manhattan suddenly felt like it was spinning. "Twins?" he managed, his voice barely audible. "What are you talking about? You were never—" "I was pregnant when I left," she cut in. "I found out the week before. I was going to tell you that night, but then I saw you with Victoria and your mother and I couldn't stay." Jackson closed his eyes, remembering that night with painful clarity. The night his mother had orchestrated what she'd called a reconciliation dinner with his ex-fiancée Victoria without telling him. The night Megan had appeared at the restaurant, seen them together, and disappeared from his life without a word. "Megan, that wasn't—" he began, but she interrupted him again. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that James needs surgery. He has a congenital heart condition that we just discovered, and the doctors need your medical history. They need to know if there's anything in your family background that could be relevant." Her voice broke slightly. "And the insurance, the procedure is expensive, and I can't—" "Where are you?" Jackson asked, already on his feet, gesturing frantically to his assistant, who had appeared in the doorway. "Boston Children's Hospital. Jackson, I'm not asking for money, I'll be there in 3 hours," he said firmly, his mind racing. "What's the room number?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Megan, I have children, twins. I have a right to know them, to help them, please." "Room 412, she finally said. "His sister Amelia is here too. They're inseparable." Jackson wrote down the information, his hand trembling slightly. "I'm on my way." The call ended, and Jackson stared at the phone, his entire reality reshaping itself around this new information. Twins, a son and a daughter he'd never known existed. His children, who had lived 10 years of their lives without him. His assistant appeared with his coat and briefcase. "I've called for the helicopter," she said efficiently. "It will take you to the airport where the jet is being prepared. The pilot says you can be in Boston within 2 hours. "Thank you, Claire," he said, his voice distant. As he shrugged on his coat, his mind replayed that fateful night a decade ago. He had been building his company, working 18-hour days to turn the small tech startup into what was now Horizon Technologies. Megan had been a graphic designer he'd hired for the company's branding. Their romance had been quick, intense, and genuine, at least on his part. His mother, Eleanor Hayes, widow of banking magnate William Hayes, had disapproved from the start. "She's after your money, Jackson," she'd said dismissively after meeting Megan just once. "A girl from that background, with no family connections, she sees you as her ticket out of mediocrity." He'd defended Megan, of course, but his mother was relentless, and when she'd arranged that dinner with Victoria, the socially appropriate ex-fiancée from a good family, he'd attended only to make it clear to both women that his future was with Megan. But Megan had seen them together through the restaurant window, Victoria's hand on his arm, his mother smiling approvingly, and had drawn her own conclusions. By the time he'd reached her apartment that night, she was gone. No note, no forwarding address. Her phone disconnected the next day. He'd searched for weeks before his pride had taken over. If she could believe he'd betray her so easily, perhaps his mother had been right about her all along. Now, as the helicopter lifted off from the rooftop helipad, Jackson stared out at the city below, wondering about the children he'd never known. What did they look like? Did they have his eyes, his stubborn determination? Had Megan told them about him, or had she created some other story to explain his absence? The thought of his son, James, in a hospital bed made his chest tight with an unfamiliar emotion. And Amelia, a daughter he couldn't even picture, 10 years of birthdays, first steps, first words, all moments he'd missed because of a misunderstanding and his own damned pride. The helicopter banked toward the private airfield where his jet waited. Jackson Hayes, billionaire tech entrepreneur, man of action and decisive leadership, felt utterly unprepared for what awaited him. For the first time in his adult life, he had no plan, no strategy for what came next. In Boston, Megan paced the small hospital room, watching her son sleep fitfully. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking his heart rhythm, while Amelia curled in a chair by the window, her nose buried in a book too advanced for most 10-year-olds. "Is he really coming?" Amelia asked without looking up, her voice carefully neutral. Megan pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, noticing the grey she'd found that morning. At 35, single motherhood and constant financial struggle had taken their toll. "He said he is," she replied, uncertain what else to say. "How did you explain to your children that their father hadn't abandoned them? He simply hadn't known they existed. What if he's mean?" Amelia's dark eyes, so like Jackson's, finally lifted from her book. "What if he's angry that you never told him about us?" Megan sat beside her daughter, pulling her close. "Your father is many things, but he's not mean. And if he's angry, it will be with me, not with you or James. Never with you." As her daughter leaned against her, Megan wondered if she'd made the right decision in calling Jackson. For 10 years she'd managed on her own, building a life for her children far from the wealth and privilege of Jackson's world. But now, with James's life potentially at stake, her pride no longer mattered. What mattered was the man who would walk through that door in the next few hours, and whether he could forgive her for keeping his children from him for a decade. The private jet touched down at Logan International Airport with barely a bump, a testament to the skill of the pilot and the quality of the aircraft. Jackson had spent the flight alternating between making urgent calls to clear his schedule and staring at his phone's blank screen, searching for pictures of Megan online, finding nothing. She had effectively disappeared from the digital world, at least under the name he knew her by. A black SUV waited on the tarmac. Within minutes, Jackson was cutting through Boston traffic, his mind racing faster than the vehicle. What would he say? How would he explain his absence to children who had every right to resent him? The questions hammered at him, unanswerable. Boston Children's Hospital loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of modern architecture and hope. Jackson strode through the entrance, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing glances from staff and visitors alike. At the information desk, he stated his destination with a voice that betrayed none of his inner turmoil. "Room 412, please. I'm here for James Turner." The elevator ride seemed interminable. When the doors finally opened on the 4th floor, Jackson hesitated, a rare moment of uncertainty for a man accustomed to decisive action. Then, squaring his shoulders, he followed the signs until he stood before room 412, hand poised to knock. Through the partially open door, he could see a small figure in the bed, dark hair, pale face, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped steadily. Beside the bed sat a girl, her head bent over a book, her profile so familiar it made his heart stutter. She had his mother's aristocratic nose, his own determined chin, and there by the window stood Megan. 10 years had changed her. The carefree artist he'd known had been replaced by a woman whose posture spoke of burdens carried too long alone. Her auburn hair was shorter now, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore simple jeans and a faded sweater, a far cry from the bohemian style he remembered. Yet when she turned at his knock, her eyes were the same deep green that had captured him from their first meeting. "Jackson," she said softly, and the world between them compressed into that single word. The girl at the bedside looked up sharply, her book forgotten. "Is that him?" she asked, her voice carrying a challenge that belied her young age. Megan nodded, moving to stand protectively between her daughter and the doorway. "Amelia, this is your father, Jackson Hayes." Jackson entered the room slowly, acutely aware of the girl's scrutiny. Her eyes, his eyes, assessed him with an intelligence that seemed beyond her years. "You're very tall," she said finally, closing her book with deliberate care. "James will be tall too, the doctors say. He's growing faster than me, even though I was born 8 minutes earlier." Jackson found himself smiling despite the tension. I was always the tallest in my class too, he offered, then turned his attention to the boy in the bed. James's features were softer than his sister's, more like Megan's, but the shape of his face, the line of his jaw, those were unmistakably Hayes traits. "What's wrong with him?" Jackson asked, moving closer to the bed. Megan ran a hand through her son's hair, a gesture of such tenderness that Jackson felt like an intruder witnessing it. "Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy," she said. "It's a thickening of the heart muscle that makes it harder for the heart to pump blood. It can be genetic. That's why we need your family medical history." Jackson nodded, his mind immediately cataloguing what he knew of his family's health. "My father died of a heart attack at 52. I always assumed it was the stress and the lifestyle, the drinking, the cigars, but perhaps there was more to it. The doctors want to run tests on you too," Megan continued, "to see if you carry the gene mutation. It would help them determine the best treatment plan for James." "Of course, anything," Jackson agreed immediately. "I'll have my personal physician send over my records as well, and the insurance." "We don't need your money," Amelia interrupted, her chin lifting in a gesture so reminiscent of himself that Jackson almost laughed. "Amelia," Megan admonished gently. "It's all right," Jackson said, understanding the girl's protectiveness. "I respect that, Amelia, but I'd like to help if I can, not because I feel obligated, but because I want to." The girl considered this, then nodded once, a regal acknowledgement that reminded Jackson disconcertingly of his mother. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitors. There were too many questions, too much unspoken history crowding the small hospital room. "Perhaps we should talk outside," Megan suggested, glancing at Amelia. "Would you stay with your brother for a few minutes?" Amelia nodded, resuming her place beside the bed, though her gaze followed the adults to the door. In the hallway, Megan leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. "I didn't expect you to come so quickly," she admitted. "What did you expect?" Jackson asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from his voice. "That I wouldn't care? That I'd send a check and go back to my life, never wanting to meet my own children?" Megan looked away. "I didn't know what to expect. It's been a long time, Jackson. People change." "Not that much," he said quietly. "Why didn't you tell me, Megan? All these years I had a right to know." She faced him then, her eyes flashing with a spark of the fire he remembered. "I tried to tell you that night. I came to the restaurant to surprise you, to share the news over dinner. Instead, I saw you with Victoria looking every bit the perfect couple. Your mother was practically glowing with approval." "It wasn't what you thought," Jackson protested. "My mother arranged that dinner without telling me. I went only to make it clear to Victoria that we were never getting back together. I was going to propose to you that weekend, Megan. I had the ring in my desk drawer." Megan's expression faltered, doubt creeping in. "Your mother said—" "My mother said what?" Jackson interrupted, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. "What exactly did she tell you?" Megan hesitated, then spoke slowly, as if recalling words burned into memory. "She came to my apartment that night after I'd seen you at the restaurant. She said you'd realized Victoria was the better choice, that you'd only been with me out of rebellion. She showed me the society page announcement she'd already prepared for your re-engagement." Jackson felt physically ill. "And you believed her? Without even talking to me?" "I was 25, pregnant and terrified," Megan said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'd just seen you with your ex-fiancé, and then your mother, who made no secret of thinking I wasn't good enough for you, confirmed my worst fears. Yes, I believed her." The weight of his mother's betrayal settled on Jackson's shoulders like a physical burden. All these years, all the missed opportunities, because Eleanor Hayes couldn't accept his choice of partner. "I should have fought harder to find you," he admitted, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I looked, but when your phone was disconnected and your apartment emptied, I convinced myself you'd never really loved me, that perhaps my mother was right." Megan's expression softened. "We both made mistakes," she conceded, "but our children shouldn't have to pay for them." The mention of the twins brought Jackson back to the present reality. "Tell me about them," he said, the hunger for knowledge about his children suddenly overwhelming. "Everything, please." As Megan began to speak, painting the portrait of two remarkable children who had grown up without him, Jackson made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, however Megan felt about him now, he would be part of his children's lives from this moment forward. And no one, Not even Eleanor Hayes would stand in his way again. The following morning found Jackson asleep in an uncomfortable hospital chair, his tall frame awkwardly folded into the small space. He woke to find Amelia studying him with unabashed curiosity, her dark eyes missing nothing. "You snore," she informed him matter-of-factly. Not loud, but definitely snoring. Jackson stretched, wincing at the stiffness in his neck. "So I've been told," he admitted, glancing at James, who still slept peacefully. The boy looked stronger this morning, some color returning to his cheeks. "Mom went to get coffee," Amelia continued, perching on the arm of his chair with surprising familiarity for someone who'd regarded him with such suspicion the day before. "She always needs 2 cups before she can function properly. She says it's because we wore her out as babies, never sleeping at the same time." Jackson smiled, treasuring this small insight into their life. "And what about you? Are you a morning person?" Amelia shrugged. "I'm a whenever there's something interesting to do person. Right now you're the most interesting thing in this room, so I'm awake." Her forthright manner reminded Jackson so much of himself that he couldn't help but laugh. "Fair enough. What would you like to know?" "Why are you so rich?" she asked immediately, as though she'd been waiting for the invitation. "Mom works all the time at 2 different jobs, and we still have to be careful with money. But you came here in a private jet. I heard the nurses talking about it." Jackson considered his answer carefully. "I built a technology company that became very successful, but I wasn't always wealthy. My father died when I was not much older than you, and while he left us financially comfortable, the real money came later from my own work." Amelia digested this. "Mom says money isn't important as long as you have enough for what you need, but she cries sometimes when she thinks we're asleep looking at bills." The simple statement hit Jackson like a physical blow. The thought of Megan struggling while he lived in luxury was unbearable. Before he could respond, Megan herself appeared in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand and surprise on her face at the scene before her. "Amelia, are you interrogating our guest?" she asked lightly, though her eyes held a warning. "We're just getting acquainted," Jackson said, standing. "Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak with you privately again. There are some things we need to discuss." Megan hesitated, then nodded. "The doctors will be doing rounds soon anyway." "Amelia, stay with your brother, please." In the small hospital garden, designed to provide patients and families a respite from the clinical environment, Jackson and Megan found a quiet bench, partially screened by ornamental grasses. The October morning was crisp, the sky a clear, endless blue that belied the tension between them. "I want to be part of their lives," Jackson stated without preamble. "I've missed 10 years. I don't want to miss another day." Megan sipped her coffee, her expression guarded. "And how do you envision that working exactly? Your life is in New York. Ours is here in Boston. You run a multinational corporation. Our lives couldn't be more different." "Things can change," Jackson said firmly. "My company has offices in Boston. I can relocate, at least part-time." "And your mother?" Megan asked, the question hanging between them like a challenge. Jackson's expression hardened. "My mother will have to accept my decisions, or she can choose not to be part of our lives either. I'm not a young man trying to prove himself anymore, Megan. I won't let her manipulate me again." Megan studied him, searching for the truth in his words. The twins need stability. They've never had a father figure. Suddenly having one who might disappear again if things get difficult. "I won't disappear," Jackson interrupted, his voice fierce with conviction. "I understand your concerns. I haven't exactly proven myself reliable from your perspective, but I'm asking for a chance to show you, to show all of you, that I can be the father they deserve." A nurse approached, interrupting their conversation. "Ms. Turner, the doctors are with James now. They'd like to speak with you." Megan rose immediately, Jackson following. In James's room, a team of doctors stood conferring over charts and monitors. The lead physician, a woman with silver-streaked hair and compassionate eyes, introduced herself to Jackson. "Dr. Patel," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "You must be James's father. We've been hoping to meet you." "What's happening?" Megan asked, her attention fixed on James, who was now awake, looking small and vulnerable against the white hospital sheets. Dr. Patel's expression was carefully neutral. "James's condition is more serious than we initially thought. The tests show significant thickening of the left ventricular wall. We're concerned about the risk of sudden cardiac arrest. The clinical terms couldn't disguise the gravity of the situation." Jackson felt the floor tilt beneath him as he processed the information. "What are our options?" he asked, instinctively moving closer to Megan, whose face had gone pale. "Surgery is the best option," Dr. Patel explained. "A septal myectomy to remove part of the thickened heart muscle and improve blood flow. It's a complex procedure, but Boston Children's has one of the best pediatric cardiac teams in the country." "And without surgery?" Megan asked, her voice barely audible. The doctor's hesitation spoke volumes. "We would manage with medications, but given the severity of James's case, it would be a temporary solution at best. The risk of complications would remain high." James looked between the adults, his young face showing more comprehension than a 10-year-old should have to bear. "Am I going to die?" he asked quietly. "No," Jackson and Megan responded simultaneously, their voices overlapping in fierce denial. Dr. Patel addressed James directly. "We're going to do everything we can to make your heart work better," she promised. "But we need to act quickly." The conversation turned to logistics, scheduling the surgery, additional tests, preparations. Through it all, Jackson remained hyper-aware of Megan beside him, her body tense with fear she wouldn't show her son. "There's one more thing," Dr. Patel said as they prepared to leave. "Given the genetic nature of this condition, we recommend testing Amelia as well. She may be asymptomatic but still affected." The possibility that both his children might have inherited this potentially deadly condition struck Jackson with terrible clarity. In the span of 24 hours, he'd gone from a man with no family ties beyond his difficult relationship with his mother to a father terrified of losing the children he'd just discovered. When the medical team departed, promising to return with surgery details, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Amelia, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet throughout the discussion, now moved to her brother's side, taking his hand in silent support. "It'll be okay," she told him with fierce certainty. "Remember when you broke your arm falling out of the treehouse? Everyone said you'd need surgery then too, but you healed without it." James managed a smile for his sister's benefit. "This is different, dummy. You can't put a heart in a cast." Their banter, affectionate despite the grave circumstances, gave Jackson a glimpse into their relationship. Protective, teasing, unshakably loyal, the kind of sibling bond he'd never experienced as an only child. "I need to make some calls," Jackson said, his mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. "I want to consult with specialists, get second opinions, make sure we're taking the right approach." "We don't need—" Megan began, but Jackson cut her off. "This isn't about money or control, Megan. This is about using every resource I have to help our son. Please, let me do this." The "our son" hung in the air between them, a bridge across the decade of separation. After a long moment, Megan nodded. Jackson stepped into the hallway, already dialing his assistant. "Claire, I need you to clear my schedule indefinitely. Then contact Dr. Reynolds at Mount Sinai and Dr. Chen at Stanford. I want consultations on a pediatric hypertrophic cardiomyopathy case, highest priority." As he continued making arrangements, Jackson became aware of someone watching him. Turning, he found Amelia standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Are you really going to help us?" she asked, her voice smaller than he'd yet heard it, reminding him that for all her precocious maturity, she was still just a child facing the potential loss of her twin. Jackson knelt to meet her at eye level. "Yes," he said simply, "with everything I have." Amelia studied him with those eyes so like his own. "Mom always said you were smart. That you could solve any problem once you put your mind to it." The revelation that Megan had spoken of him, and positively, caught Jackson off guard. "She said that?" Amelia nodded. "She has a box with pictures of you. She thinks I don't know about it, but I found it when I was 7. There's one where you're both laughing and you're looking at her like—" She searched for the right words, "like she's the only person in the whole world." Jackson's throat tightened. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman." "Do you still love her?" Amelia asked with a child's directness. Before Jackson could formulate a response to this unexpectedly complex question, his phone rang, his mother's ringtone. With a grimace, he silenced it. "That's the 3rd time she's called," Amelia observed. "Is it her? Your mother?" Jackson nodded, pocketing the phone. "We'll talk later," he said, not specifying whether he meant with Amelia or Eleanor. As they returned to James's room, Jackson's phone buzzed with a text message. Against his better judgment, he checked it. "What are you doing in Boston? Victoria says she saw you at the hospital. Call me immediately. Mother." The old anger flared, but now it was tempered with something new: determination. Eleanor Hayes had cost him 10 years with his children. She would not cost him 1 minute more. The pre-dawn hospital corridor was silent, except for Jackson's footsteps as he paced, too anxious to sit. Behind the closed doors of the operating room, a team of surgeons worked on his son's heart, a son he'd known for just 3 days. The surgery had been scheduled with unprecedented speed after James had experienced a dangerous arrhythmia the previous afternoon. Megan sat motionless in the waiting area, her face pale with exhaustion and worry. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten beyond the sandwiches Jackson had insisted she take. Amelia had finally succumbed to fatigue, curled uncomfortably across 2 chairs, her head resting on Megan's lap. "You should try to sleep too," Jackson said softly, pausing in his pacing. Megan shook her head. "I can't. Not until I know he's okay." Jackson understood. The helplessness was excruciating. To have all the resources in the world and still be unable to do anything but wait while strangers held your child's life in their hands. He settled into the chair beside her, careful not to disturb Amelia. "I've been thinking about what happens after," he said, "when James recovers." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Megan cautioned, though her fingers gently stroked Amelia's hair, seeking comfort in the presence of one child, while the other remained beyond her reach. "No, we need to talk about this," Jackson insisted gently. "I meant what I said before. I want to be part of their lives, a real part, not just financial support or occasional visits." Megan met his gaze, her exhaustion making her unusually vulnerable. "And what does that look like to you realistically? Joint custody? Holidays and summers? The twins have school, friends, a life in Boston. I have my work." "Move to New York," Jackson suggested, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. "All of you. I have a townhouse with plenty of room. The twins would have the best education, access to excellent medical care for James's follow-up. You wouldn't have to work 2 jobs anymore." Megan's expression closed. "So I should just uproot our entire lives and become what? Your dependent? The poor ex-girlfriend living off your charity?" "That's not what I meant," Jackson said, frustration edging his voice. "I'm trying to find solutions here, Megan. Ways to be present for my children without disrupting their lives more than necessary." "Their lives are already disrupted," she countered. "James is having open-heart surgery. Amelia is being tested for the same condition. Everything is changing, whether we want it to or not." The truth of her words hung between them. Before Jackson could respond, the double doors at the end of the hallway swung open, and Dr. Patel appeared, still in surgical scrubs. Both parents rose immediately, Megan gently shifting Amelia, who stirred but didn't wake. "The surgery went well," Dr. Patel said, and Jackson felt his knees weaken with relief. "We were able to remove the excess tissue without complications. His heart is already showing improved function." Megan pressed a hand to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "When can we see him?" "He'll be in recovery for about an hour, then move to the pediatric ICU. You can see him then, though he'll be sedated for some time." The doctor's expression softened. "He's a fighter, your boy. His heart is strong despite the structural issues." After Dr. Patel left, Megan collapsed back into her chair, the tension of the past hours giving way to exhausted tears. Without thinking, Jackson pulled her into his arms, and she didn't resist, her body shaking with silent sobs against his chest. "He's going to be okay," Jackson murmured into her hair. "Our son is going to be okay." It was in this tableau, Megan in Jackson's embrace, Amelia sleeping nearby, that Eleanor Hayes found them. The elegant older woman appeared at the entrance to the waiting area, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, her expression a mixture of confusion and displeasure. "Jackson," she said sharply, "what on earth is going on? I've been trying to reach you for days." Jackson stiffened but didn't release Megan, who pulled away regardless, quickly wiping her tears. "Mother," he acknowledged coldly. "This is neither the time nor the place." Eleanor's gaze swept over Megan, recognition dawning. "Ms. Turner," she said, her tone making the name sound like an accusation. "I should have guessed. Victoria said she saw you with a woman at the hospital, but I never imagined—" "My son just came through heart surgery," Jackson interrupted, standing to place himself between his mother and Megan. "Your grandson, though you didn't know he existed because you drove his mother away before she could tell me she was pregnant." Eleanor blanched. "Grandson? What ridiculous story has she told you? After all these years, she suddenly appears claiming, "Twins, actually," came Amelia's clear voice. The girl had awakened and now regarded Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Amelia. James is the one who had surgery. You must be our grandmother." Eleanor stared at the child, momentarily speechless. Even in her rumpled clothes with sleep-tousled hair, Amelia's resemblance to the Hayes family was unmistakable. The same dark eyes that had looked back at Eleanor from her own mirror for decades. The same proud bearing. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation elsewhere," Jackson suggested, noticing a nurse's disapproving glance at the tension radiating from their group. "There's a private consultation room down the hall," Megan offered, her composure regained. "Amelia, why don't you go with the nurse to get some breakfast while we talk to Mrs. Hayes?" In the small consultation room, with its generic landscape paintings and uncomfortable chairs, the three adults faced one another across an invisible battlefield of decade-old wounds and fresh revelations. "You lied to her," Jackson stated flatly, addressing his mother without preamble. "You went to Megan's apartment and deliberately drove her away with lies about Victoria and me." Eleanor's chin lifted defensively. "I was protecting you. She wasn't suitable. A graphic designer with no family connections, no understanding of our world. You were infatuated, making reckless decisions that would have damaged your future." "That wasn't your decision to make," Jackson countered, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because of your interference, I've missed 10 years of my children's lives. Years I can never get back." "Children you didn't even know existed until a few days ago," Eleanor pointed out. "If she had truly loved you, she would have fought for you, not run away at the first sign of trouble." "I was 25 and pregnant with twins," Megan interjected, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "The man I loved appeared to be reconciling with his ex-fiancée. His mother, you, came to my apartment with a society page announcement and told me in no uncertain terms that I was just a phase, a rebellion against family expectations." She shook her head. "I was terrified and heartbroken. So yes, I left. Perhaps it was cowardly, but I did what I thought was right for my children." "Our children," Jackson corrected gently. Eleanor looked between them, calculation replacing shock in her expression. "Well, what's done is done. The question now is how to move forward. Obviously, we'll need DNA testing to confirm paternity before any arrangements are made." "Mother," Jackson said, his tone a warning, "there will be no DNA testing. One look at Amelia is enough to confirm she's a Hayes, and I've already seen my medical records alongside James's. The same congenital heart condition that likely killed Dad has affected my son." Eleanor flinched at the mention of her late husband. "William's heart attack was due to stress," she insisted, the familiar denial surfacing. "No, it wasn't," Jackson said flatly. "Dad had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, just like James. The doctors confirmed it when they reviewed our family history. He probably never knew. But I've been tested now too, and while I don't have the condition, I carry the gene, a gene I passed to my son." The medical reality seemed to penetrate Eleanor's defenses where emotional appeals couldn't. She sank into a chair, suddenly looking her age. "I never meant to harm anyone," she said softly, "least of all a child. Children." "But you did harm them," Megan said, not unkindly. "Your actions deprived them of their father, and deprived Jackson of his children. That can't be undone." An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Eleanor spoke again, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "These children, my grandchildren, what are they like?" The simple question contained an olive branch of sorts. Jackson and Megan exchanged glances, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. "Amelia is brilliant," Megan began. "Reads everything she can get her hands on, asks questions that would stump college professors. She's protective of her brother, fiercely loyal. James is more gentle, more artistic," Jackson continued, surprising Megan with his insight after just a few days. "He sees the world differently, finds beauty in unexpected places. He's brave too, braver than any 10-year-old should have to be." Eleanor listened, something softening in her expression. "I would like to meet them properly," she said finally, "if you'll allow it." Before either parent could respond, a nurse appeared at the door. "Ms. Turner, Mr. Hayes, James is asking for you both." In the pediatric ICU, James lay surrounded by machines, looking impossibly small and fragile. But his eyes were open, and he managed a weak smile when he saw his parents. "Did they fix me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. They did, Megan confirmed, taking his hand gently. Your heart is stronger now. Where's Mia? James asked, using his sister's nickname. Getting breakfast, Jackson told him, standing on the opposite side of the bed. She'll be here soon. James studied Jackson with drowsy curiosity. Are you really staying? Even after I get better? The question pierced Jackson's heart. Yes, he promised. I'm staying, for as long as you and your sister want me around. Good, James murmured, his eyelids growing heavy again. Mom needs help. She works too hard. As the boy drifted back to sleep, Jackson met Megan's gaze across the bed. In her eyes he saw the walls beginning to crumble, walls built over a decade of solitary struggle and protective fear. We should talk, he said quietly, about the future. All of us. 6 months later, the Hayes townhouse in Manhattan echoed with unfamiliar sounds. Children's laughter, the pounding of feet on stairs, excited voices calling from room to room. The formal dining room, once used only for occasional business dinners, now served as a homework center, textbooks and art supplies scattered across the antique mahogany table. In the garden, recently redesigned to include a play area and comfortable seating, Megan sat with Eleanor, an uneasy truce established between them. They watched as Jackson helped James practice gentle basketball shots, the boy's surgical scar still pink but healing well. He's good with them, Eleanor observed, surprising Megan with the lack of criticism in her tone. Better than William ever was with Jackson. He's trying to make up for lost time, Megan replied, her gaze softening as she watched Jackson patiently adjust James's stance. The move to New York had been a compromise, a trial period, Megan had insisted, with her maintaining her own apartment nearby. But as weeks passed and the twins settled into their new school, as James's health improved under the care of the city's best cardiologists, the lines between separate households had blurred. Amelia appeared from inside the house, carrying a tray of lemonade with careful concentration. I made it myself, she announced proudly, setting it down without spilling a drop. It looks wonderful, Eleanor praised, earning a beaming smile from her granddaughter. As Jackson and James joined them for refreshments, Megan found herself studying the man she'd once loved, the father of her children. The past months had revealed a different Jackson than she remembered, more patient, more vulnerable, more determined to prioritize his family over his empire. Late that night, after the twins were asleep in their rooms they'd decorated themselves with Jackson's enthusiastic support, Megan found him in his study, reviewing medical journals on pediatric cardiology. Still researching? She asked, leaning against the door frame. Jackson looked up, smiling at the sight of her. Always. I want to understand everything about his condition. Megan entered the room, perching on the edge of his desk. The doctors say he's doing remarkably well. The surgery was a complete success. I know, Jackson acknowledged. I just can't help feeling that if I'd been there from the beginning, we might have caught it sooner. We can't change the past, Megan said softly. We can only move forward. Jackson set aside the journal, taking her hands in his. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Moving forward, he hesitated, then continued. I know we agreed to take things slowly, to focus on the twins' adjustment. But these past months, having all of you here, even with the separate living arrangements, it's shown me what I want for our future. And what's that? Megan asked, her heart beating faster despite her attempt at casualness. This, Jackson said simply. All of us together. A real family. He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small velvet box. I've had this for 10 years. Opening it revealed a ring, not the ostentatious diamond one might expect from a billionaire, but a unique emerald surrounded by smaller stones, set in an artistic, asymmetrical design that perfectly reflected Megan's aesthetic. You kept it all this time, she whispered, stunned. I couldn't bring myself to return it, Jackson admitted. Even when I thought you'd left me by choice, something made me hold on to it. Maybe some part of me never stopped hoping. Megan stared at the ring, emotions warring within her. Jackson, I'm not asking for an answer tonight, he assured her quickly. I know we're still finding our way back to each other. I just wanted you to know that the ring has always been yours whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready. Megan looked from the ring to the man before her. The father who had dropped everything to rush to his son's bedside, who had worked tirelessly to ensure James received the best care, who had shown unlimited patience with Amelia's initial wariness, who had begun the difficult process of setting boundaries with his mother for the sake of his new family. With deliberate care, she took the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though the decade that had passed was merely a momentary interruption rather than a chasm of lost years. "I think," she said slowly, "that 10 years is long enough to wait." "Don't you?" Jackson stood, drawing her into his arms with a gentleness that belied the intensity in his eyes. "Far too long," he agreed before lowering his lips to hers. In the doorway, unnoticed by either adult, Amelia watched with satisfaction before quietly retreating to tell her brother their carefully orchestrated plan, Operation Parent Trap, they'd called it, had finally succeeded. Some hearts, it seemed, needed no surgical intervention to find their way back to wholeness.